My sister turned my cabin into a fitness studio and refused to leave. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Original post. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but after 8 months of escalating frustration, I need to get this off my chest. I'm a 28-year-old conservation officer working in a remote area of the Pacific Northwest. My job involves protecting wildlife habitats, monitoring endangered species, and spending days at a time in the wilderness tracking poachers and conducting research. It's demanding work that I love, but it requires having a peaceful sanctuary to return to after spending 72 hours straight tracking a wounded elk through rough terrain or dismantling illegal hunting camps. 2 years ago, I inherited my grandfather's cabin on 40 acres of pristine forest land. It's nothing fancy, just a main house with 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, and a detached guest cabin that my grandfather built in the 1980s. The property backs up to protected wilderness, and I've spent considerable time and money converting it into a certified wildlife rehabilitation facility. The guest cabin was perfect for visiting researchers or occasional volunteers who helped with injured animals. My sister Rachel is 30 years old and works as a fitness instructor in Seattle. We've never been particularly close. She's always been the city person who complained about dirt and bugs during family camping trips, while I was the kid bringing home injured birds and reading field guides for fun. Our parents always joked that they couldn't believe we came from the same gene pool. 8 months ago, Rachel called me in tears. She'd broken up with her boyfriend of 3 years, her apartment lease was ending, and she claimed she was having an existential crisis about urban living. She begged to stay in my guest cabin for just a few weeks to reconnect with nature and find herself. She promised it would be temporary, just until she figured out her next move. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The guest cabin was empty at the time, and despite our differences, she's still family. The first red flag appeared within days. I came home from a 3-day patrol to find professional lighting equipment set up throughout my property. Ring lights surrounded the guest cabin porch, reflectors leaned against my grandfather's hand-built fence, and extension cords snaked across the yard like invasive vines. Rachel had decided my property was the perfect backdrop for her new wellness brand focused on wild fitness and natural movement. I tried to be understanding at first. The pandemic had been hard on fitness instructors, and if filming a few videos helped her get back on her feet, what was the harm? I established some basic ground rules. No filming near the rehabilitation enclosures, no loud music during dawn and dusk when wildlife was most active, and absolutely no clients or photo shoots on the property. She agreed enthusiastically, hugging me and calling me the best brother ever. Those boundaries lasted exactly 2 weeks. I returned from a particularly grueling assignment investigating illegal traplines to find my living room transformed into a makeshift yoga studio. My furniture had been pushed against the walls, mirrors leaned against every surface, and Rachel was in the middle of filming what she called a forest flow yoga series, with 2 cameras running. The cottagecore aesthetic she'd created for her videos had completely overtaken my personal space. "Just this once," she promised when I confronted her. "The lighting in the guest cabin isn't right for this particular series. I'll put everything back, I swear." But it wasn't just once. Every time in the field, I'd return to find some new invasion of my space. She'd moved her filming into my kitchen for wilderness nutrition content. She'd taken over my back deck for sunset strength training. She even started using my wildlife observation blind as a backdrop for meditation videos, disturbing the very animals I was trying to protect. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the following months. Rachel's few weeks stretched into months with no sign of her leaving. When I tried to discuss a timeline for her departure, she'd deflect with tears about how the wellness industry was so competitive and how she was just starting to build her brand. She'd show me her growing Instagram following, now at 50,000 followers, as proof that her wild wellness warrior persona was working. Meanwhile, my work and personal life suffered tremendously. I couldn't bring injured animals to the rehabilitation area without them being stressed by her music and constant movement. Researcher colleagues stopped visiting because Rachel would try to recruit them for her videos or pepper them with questions about superfood foraging. I once brought home an orphaned bear cub that needed round-the-clock care, only to have Rachel's 6 a.m. sunrise boot camp livestream send it into a panic that set back its recovery by weeks. The breaking point came last month. I'd been gone for 5 days assisting with a massive wildlife trafficking bust, the kind of operation that leaves you physically and emotionally drained. All I wanted was to come home, take a hot shower, and sleep in my own bed. Instead, I arrived to find my driveway full of cars and 20 people doing burpees in my front yard while Rachel shouted encouragement through a megaphone. She'd started hosting wild wellness retreats at $500 per person for a weekend of authentic natural living on my property. Without my knowledge or consent, she'd been advertising my home as a rustic wellness sanctuary and booking clients for months in advance. When I ordered everyone to leave immediately, Rachel pulled me aside and actually had the audacity to be angry with me. "You're ruining my business," she hissed. "These people paid good money. This is my property." I shot back. "You don't have a business here, you're a guest who's overstayed their welcome." She tried to guilt me, saying she'd already spent the deposit money and couldn't refund it. She claimed she'd planned to surprise me with rent money once the business took off. She even suggested we could be partners in turning the property into a wellness retreat center. When I remained firm that everyone needed to leave immediately, she started crying and told the clients that her controlling brother was having a mood swing, but that she'd reschedule their retreat. That night, I gave her 30 days written notice to vacate. She laughed it off, saying I'd never actually evict family. She posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story about how sometimes the people closest to you don't support your dreams, and nature belongs to everyone. Her followers commented with hearts and support, having no idea she was essentially squatting on my property. Yesterday marked day 31, and she's still here. This morning, I found her setting up for another video in my kitchen, using my grandfather's hand-carved table as a prop for something called ancestral eating habits. When I reminded her that her 30 days were up, she said she'd looked into tenant rights and I had no legal basis to remove her since she'd been there over 6 months and received mail at this address. I'm at my wit's end. I've spent my entire adult life protecting this land and its wildlife, and my own sister is treating it like her personal Instagram backdrop. I have important conservation work to do, but instead, I'm dealing with her daily disruptions. The stress is affecting my job performance, and my supervisor has noticed. I can't even bring my work home anymore. Last week, I had to drive an injured owl 2 hours to another rehabilitation facility because Rachel was doing a drum circle wellness workshop that would have been too stressful for the bird's recovery. I've started the formal eviction process, but my state requires 60 days notice for month-to-month tenants, and that's assuming she doesn't fight it. Meanwhile, she's escalating her content production, seemingly trying to squeeze every bit of value from my property while she can. She's even started hinting to her followers about potentially buying her own wellness sanctuary, heavily implying she might purchase my property, which isn't for sale and never will be. I don't know what to do anymore. My parents think I should just let her stay since she's not hurting anyone, and family helps family. They don't understand that she's literally interfering with wildlife conservation and rehabilitation. My sanctuary has turned into a social media circus, and I'm losing my mind. Update 1. The nuclear option, 2 weeks later. Thank you to everyone who responded to my original post with advice and support. Many of you were right. I'd been far too passive and needed to take decisive action. After consulting with a lawyer specializing in property law and reading through hundreds of comments, I implemented what I'm calling Operation Reclamation. First, I need to address something many of you pointed out. Rachel had no tenant rights. The guest cabin is a separate structure with its own address, and she'd never paid rent or utilities. My lawyer confirmed she was a guest who had become a trespasser, not a tenant. Armed with this knowledge, I moved forward with my plan. I took a week off work, the first vacation time I'd used in 2 years. Rachel didn't know I was staying home. She left early Monday morning for her usual coffee shop content planning session, expecting me to be gone on my regular patrol route. The moment her car disappeared down the drive, I got to work. Step 1. I changed every lock on the main house. New deadbolts, new door handles, even new locks on the windows. I installed a coded entry system that records every entry and exit. I also added security cameras covering all entrances, something I'd been meaning to do anyway for the wildlife rehabilitation area. Step 2. I moved every piece of furniture out of the main house's common areas that she'd been using for filming. Everything went into a storage unit in town. The living room where she filmed yoga? Completely empty. The kitchen she'd commandeered for nutrition content? Table and chairs gone, leaving only appliances. I even removed the curtains she'd hung for better lighting ambience. Step 3. I installed keyed locks on every interior door in the main house. My bedroom, my office, even the bathroom. Each lock had only one key, which stayed with me. Step 4. I had a contractor friend help me install a temporary wall sectioning off the hallway to the main house from the mudroom entrance, essentially making the main house completely inaccessible from the guest cabin area. Step 5. I posted official no trespassing signs around the entire property and filed the paperwork with the county sheriff's office, specifically naming Rachel as someone who was not permitted on any part of the property except the guest cabin she currently occupied. When Rachel returned that afternoon, she tried to enter the main house as usual and found herself locked out. The explosion of texts and calls was immediate. "What the hell did you do? The door isn't working." "This isn't funny. Let me in now, I have a live stream scheduled in an hour. I calmly responded with a single text, "You have access to the guest cabin where you're staying as my guest. The main house is my private residence. You are not permitted inside." She tried everything. She attempted to climb through windows, locked. She tried to reason with me through the door, I wasn't home. She even called our parents claiming I'd gone crazy and locked her out of her home. When she posted on Instagram that she was having technical difficulties with her live stream, she tried to spin it as taking an authentic break from content creation. The next morning, I found her attempting to pick the lock on the back door with a bobby pin. I immediately called the sheriff's office and reported an attempted break-in. When the deputy arrived, someone I knew from my conservation work, Rachel tried to explain that she lived here and I was being unreasonable. The deputy asked to see her lease agreement or any proof of tenancy in the main house. When she couldn't provide anything, he informed her that attempting to break into a residence she didn't have permission to enter was criminal trespassing. The legal notice I had my lawyer draft arrived the next day via certified mail. It clearly stated that she had 14 days to vacate the guest cabin or formal trespassing charges would be filed. Unlike an eviction, this was a notice to quit for a guest who had overstayed their welcome. The notice also included a cease and desist regarding any commercial activities on the property, including filming, photography, or hosting any wellness events. Rachel's response was to double down on social media. She posted a tearful video about family betrayal and how her brother was choosing property over people. She claimed I was gatekeeping nature and preventing her from sharing wellness with the world. What she didn't realize was that my lawyer was documenting everything. Every post where she admitted to running a commercial business on my property without permission, every video showing her in my house without consent, every retreat advertisement, it was all evidence. The most satisfying moment came when she tried to film content in the guest cabin, only to realize I'd also shut off the Wi-Fi router that serviced that building. Technically, I'd only agreed to let her stay. Nobody said anything about providing internet. She had to use her phone's hotspot for basic connectivity, which burned through her data plan in 2 days of attempted video uploads. Her followers started noticing the change in content quality. Without the main house's spacious rooms and natural lighting, her videos were cramped and dark. The guest cabin's dated wood paneling and small windows didn't match her carefully curated aesthetic. Comments started asking why her videos looked different and less professional. Her engagement rates plummeted. Yesterday was day 13 of the 14-day notice. Rachel attempted one last manipulation. She showed up at the main house door with our parents on video call, trying to mediate the situation. Our mother was crying, saying she just wanted her children to get along. Our father said I was being unnecessarily harsh and should find a compromise. I calmly showed them the documented evidence, the business advertisements using my address, the Instagram posts of clients on my property, the videos of her in my house without permission, and photos of the stressed wildlife her activities had disturbed. I explained that she turned my conservation property into a commercial fitness studio without my consent and against my explicit wishes. The turning point was when I showed them a video from my wildlife camera of her Medicine Walk group trampling through a restored wetland area where endangered salamanders breed. Even through the phone screen, I could see my father's expression change. As someone who'd taught us both to respect nature as children, seeing Rachel lead paying customers through protected habitat finally made him understand. "Rachel," he said quietly, "you need to leave your brother's property. Tomorrow is day 14. Her car is already packed." Update 2. The professional consequences, 6 weeks later. The fallout from Rachel's departure has been more extensive than I ever anticipated. I thought once she left the property, this chapter of my life would close. Instead, her decision to escalate on social media triggered a chain of events that ultimately destroyed the very career she was trying to build. After leaving my property, Rachel didn't go quietly. She rented a small apartment in Seattle and immediately launched what can only be described as a scorched earth social media campaign. She created a series of videos titled My Truth, Nature, Family, and Betrayal, where she portrayed herself as a victim of toxic masculinity and property hoarding. She claimed I had ripped her from her spiritual connection to the land, and was keeping nature locked away like a private preserve. The problem with her narrative was that she included footage of my property, including clearly visible shots of my rehabilitation facility's signage and permit numbers. Within days, my conservation department was flooded with calls and emails from her followers demanding I be fired for gatekeeping public land. Some even accused me of illegally keeping wildlife. This forced my department to issue a public statement clarifying that my property was private land with legal wildlife rehabilitation permits, not public property. They also had to explain that hosting commercial fitness retreats in proximity to recovering wildlife violated multiple state and federal regulations. The statement noted that any such activities would have required permits, insurance, and wildlife impact assessments, none of which Rachel had obtained. That's when things got interesting. The State Department of Licensing, which oversees fitness instruction certifications, received the Conservation Department statement and opened an investigation into Rachel's business practices. It turns out that using your fitness instruction license to run unlicensed retreats on property you don't own, without proper insurance or permits, violates professional ethics standards. Meanwhile, Rachel's former clients started coming forward. 3 separate people filed complaints stating they'd paid for wild wellness retreats that were canceled with no refund. Others reported that they'd been led through private property and protected habitats without being informed of the legal or environmental implications. One client, a lawyer herself, was particularly outraged to learn she'd unknowingly participated in criminal trespassing. The investigation revealed that Rachel had collected over $30,000 in deposits for future retreats on my property, retreats she had no legal right to host. She'd been operating an unlicensed business, hadn't reported the income, and had no liability insurance. When clients started demanding refunds she couldn't provide, several filed small claims court cases. Then came the criminal charges. The county prosecutor, after reviewing the evidence my lawyer had compiled, filed charges for criminal trespass, theft of services, for the unauthorized use of utilities, and operating a business without a license. The trespass charge was particularly serious because she'd continued commercial activities after being explicitly told to stop, and she'd attempted to break into the main house after being locked out. Rachel tried to fight back by claiming she'd had implied permission to run her business based on our family relationship. However, my lawyer had kept every text message where I'd explicitly forbidden commercial activities, every notice to cease operations, and security footage of her attempting to pick locks after being barred from the main house. Her own social media posts became evidence against her, especially the ones where she'd boasted about manifesting abundance through her entrepreneurial courage in claiming space. The professional consequences were swift and devastating. The state licensing board suspended her fitness instruction certification pending the outcome of the criminal case. Without that certification, the 3 gyms where she taught classes had to let her go. Her liability insurance, which she'd apparently had for her gym work but hadn't extended to her retreats, dropped her coverage after learning about the unlicensed business activities. The social media implosion was even more dramatic. Someone created a compilation video showing Rachel's wild wellness content side by side with footage of the actual wildlife rehabilitation work I do. The contrast between her talking about connecting with nature while wearing designer athleisure and my actual conservation work, sedating injured bears, removing snares from deer, testing water quality in restored wetlands, went viral on TikTok with the hashtag #FakeWildness. Her follower count, which had peaked at around 75,000, plummeted to under 12,000 within 3 weeks. The comments sections became brutal. Former fans felt deceived, especially those who'd paid for retreats. Environmental activists called her out for appropriating conservation language while damaging actual habitats. Even the wellness community distanced themselves, with several prominent influencers making posts about the importance of authentic and ethical practice. Rachel tried damage control by pivoting to a victim of cancel culture narrative, but it backfired when local news picked up the story. Fitness influencer charged with trespassing at wildlife sanctuary made headlines in Seattle media. The articles included quotes from the Sheriff's Department about the attempted break-in and from the Conservation Department about the environmental damage caused by unauthorized commercial activities. The criminal case was resolved last week. Rachel pled no contest to misdemeanor trespassing and operating without a business license. She received 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service specifically with environmental cleanup crews, and was ordered to pay $15,000 in restitution, $5,000 to me for damages and unauthorized use of the property, and $10,000 to the State Wildlife Rehabilitation Fund. The judge was particularly unsympathetic when Rachel tried to explain she was just sharing wellness with the world. He pointed out that she'd commercialized someone else's property without permission, endangered protected wildlife, and damaged restored habitats. He noted that her social media presence showed clear premeditation and a pattern of escalation despite repeated warnings. The Professional Licensing Board made their final decision yesterday. Rachel's fitness instruction certification has been permanently revoked. She's barred from reapplying for 3 years, and any future application will require proof of ethics training and liability insurance. Without certification, she can't teach at any reputable gym or studio. Her Wild Wellness Warrior brand is effectively dead. Our parents have been silent through all of this. My mother sent me one text saying she was disappointed in how things turned out, but my father later called to apologize for not taking my concerns seriously earlier. He admitted he hadn't understood the scope of what Rachel was doing until he saw the news coverage. Rachel herself has only contacted me once since the court hearing, through her lawyer, requesting I write a letter supporting the restoration of her professional certification. I declined. Final update. Full circle, 4 months later. 4 months have passed since Rachel's legal troubles concluded, and I wanted to provide one last update to close this chapter properly. The transformation of both my property and life since reclaiming my space has been remarkable, and there's a poetic justice to how everything has settled. First, the positive developments. The guest cabin that once housed my sister's unwelcome fitness empire has been completely renovated into a proper wildlife rehabilitation facility. Using part of the restitution money and a grant I received from the State Wildlife Fund, ironically, the same fund Rachel was ordered to pay into, I've transformed the space into a medical treatment center for injured raptors. The cabin now features specialized enclosures, medical equipment, and climate control systems designed specifically for bird rehabilitation. The main house has returned to its intended purpose, a quiet sanctuary where I can decompress after difficult field assignments. I've reinstalled my furniture, removed all the locks from interior doors, and even restored my grandfather's workshop that Rachel had tried to convert into a meditation space. The property once again feels like home rather than a battlefield. My professional life has flourished without the constant disruptions. Last month, I led a multi-agency operation that shut down the largest wildlife trafficking ring in our state's history. The work required weeks of undercover investigation and surveillance, something I never could have managed while dealing with Rachel's chaos. My supervisor nominated me for a federal conservation award, noting my exceptional dedication despite personal challenges. The wildlife on my property has returned to normal patterns. The deer trails Rachel's clients had disrupted have recovered. The salamander breeding pools her medicine walks trampled are showing signs of new egg masses. A pair of barred owls has taken up residence in the trees near the main house, something that never would have happened with the constant noise and activity. I've also been able to resume bringing injured animals home for rehabilitation, successfully releasing 12 recovered raptors and countless small mammals over the past 4 months. I've also started hosting legitimate educational programs. Once a month, I partner with local schools to bring students to the property for conservation education. They learn about wildlife rehabilitation, habitat restoration, and the importance of protecting natural spaces. It's everything Rachel claimed to be doing, connecting people with nature, but with actual substance, proper permits, and respect for the land. Now, for Rachel's situation. After her certification was revoked and her social media presence collapsed, she moved back to our parents' house temporarily. According to my mother, she spent the first month in deep denial, claiming she was being persecuted for being a visionary. She attempted to launch a comeback on a different platform under the name Phoenix Wellness Rising, but when someone inevitably connected it to her previous accounts, that attempt failed too. The community service requirement proved transformative, though not in the way anyone expected. Rachel was assigned to an environmental restoration crew removing invasive species from state parks. For someone who'd spent years talking about nature while never actually engaging with it, the physical reality of conservation work was shocking. She called me crying after her first day, covered in blackberry scratches and mud, saying she had no idea conservation was this hard. Over time, something shifted. Working alongside actual environmentalists and conservationists, she began to understand what she'd been appropriating. She learned the difference between performative nature worship and genuine environmental stewardship. Her crew supervisor, unaware of our connection, sent me an email through the Conservation Network praising a new volunteer who'd really turned around her attitude. Last month, Rachel sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, not a text or email. It was the first genuine apology I'd received from her. She acknowledged that she'd violated my trust, damaged my property, and appropriated conservation language for personal profit. She admitted she'd been so focused on building her brand that she'd lost sight of basic respect and boundaries. Most surprisingly, she said the community service had taught her more about nature in 3 months than her entire wild wellness period. She's now working part-time at a plant nursery specializing in native species, real, dirty, unglamorous work that she seems to genuinely enjoy. She's taking online classes in horticulture and environmental science. Her social media presence is gone entirely. She deleted all her accounts and hasn't shown any interest in rebuilding them. Our parents report she seems calmer and more grounded than they've seen her in years. We're not reconciled. The damage to our relationship was too severe for easy repair. But we've reached a détente. She sent me a photo last week of her planting native camas bulbs in our parents' yard with a simple caption, "Actual wild wellness." I didn't respond, but I appreciated the growth it represented. The legal consequences continue to follow her. Job applications requiring background checks reveal her criminal record. The fitness industry has effectively blacklisted her. She'll carry the financial burden of refunding clients and legal fees for years. These are appropriate consequences for her choices, and I feel no guilt about my role in bringing them about. Some of Rachel's former followers have reached out to apologize for their harassment when the story first broke. Several have even donated to legitimate wildlife conservation organizations after learning about the real work involved. It's a small silver lining to an otherwise dark cloud. The most satisfying development came last week. A documentary filmmaker contacted me about featuring my rehabilitation facility in a piece about private conservation efforts. When she arrived for the initial interview, she mentioned she'd been following the story since it went viral. "Your situation really highlighted the difference between performance and purpose," she said. "Your sister was performing connection to nature. You're actually living it." As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my grandfather's old rocking chair on the back porch, watching a recovering hawk test its wings in the flight enclosure. The morning is quiet except for birdsong and the distant bugle of elk in the protected forest. My property is once again what it was meant to be, a sanctuary for wildlife and a haven for someone who's dedicated his life to protecting it. To those who followed this story from the beginning, thank you for your support and advice. To anyone dealing with family members who refuse to respect boundaries, remember that protecting your peace and purpose isn't selfish, it's necessary. Family relationships shouldn't come at the cost of your life's work or personal sanctuary. Rachel learned, eventually and painfully, that nature isn't a backdrop for content creation or a commodity to be packaged and sold. It's a complex system that demands respect, understanding, and genuine commitment to preserve. The wilderness she tried to capitalize on ultimately taught her the humility she needed, just not in the way she expected. My cabin is peaceful again. The wildlife is thriving. My conservation work continues unimpeded. And somewhere across town, my sister is learning to appreciate nature with dirt under her fingernails instead of ring lights in her face. Perhaps that's the best ending the story could have, not reconciliation, but growth, not forgiveness, but forward movement, not performance, but purpose. The guest cabin that once echoed with wild wellness warrior mantras now shelters injured owls learning to fly again. I can't think of a more fitting transformation.